All right, welcome to the new JFK show number 219. Tonight we're going to have Jim Fetzer and Larry Rivera, and we're going to be primarily discussing the state of conferences as far as JFK is concerned. Jim, tell me what you've been finding out.
Well, what we're going to begin with is the conference in which Larry and I just participated in Dallas that was organized by Judith Ferry Baker. They had a fairly impressive lineup. But when we got deeply into the conference, we found it was a bit of a setup. Look at this very wonderful cover for the program, Gary. You agree that's nice looking.
Nice.
Yeah. But when you got into it, you found there were some oddities here. It began on Thursday where they had Ole Damagard talking about parallels between the murder of JFK and Sweden's Prime Minister Olof Palme from Spain. Then Judith was talking, as she would many different times. I missed this because I was here in Madison for family events. Then on Saturday, they had Pete Hyman, who's a good guy.
That's Friday.
Go ahead, Larry.
That's Friday, Jim, Friday.
Yeah, this is Friday. No, the other was Thursday night.
Right, Thursday. And what you have on the, yeah, that's Thursday.
Yeah, that's Thursday.
Right. And now I'm turned into Friday.
Right.
Where Judith and Peter Hyman's talking about Bobby and so forth. And I was very glad that Bobby was on. I had suggested to Judith that it would be a good idea to expand from JFK to RFK and MLK, and she followed my lead. Now, Richard Bartholomew is a super good guy. David Denton also gave a talk, which I missed. Then we had a panel about Mandolin Duncan Brown. And notice one of the featured panelists is Robert Groden.
Yes.
Now, that's just an overture, because later, and Larry, you watched this, didn't you, with Tom Whitehead and Sidney Wilkinson? These are the Hollywood film restoration experts who've been working on the Zapruder film and have been impressed with the amateurish way in which the blowout at the back of the head was blacked out. Larry, why don't you say a few words about her presentation?
Well, before that, I want to backtrack a little bit because David Denton, a good friend of ours, had his time sort of hijacked a little bit by Ed Tatro, who went in and hogged, at least 20 minutes of his time.
Really?
Yeah, he did. I forgot to tell you about that. But anyway, Pete Hyman's a great friend, tremendous photographer there. He did the interview with Paul Schrade, which was so masterful on Sunday. He did it via special videos that he presented. It was very touching. Richard Bartholomew with the deep Texas in the Deep State, where he's organized this think tank, and he was taking donations of $25, and the book was free, to fund, this think tank of researchers and people, who really care about doing serious research. And like you said, Richard is a very, very serious researcher, very well respected for many years, for a long, long time. Went back to the early 90s. Okay, and David Denton, like I just mentioned,
He's a good guy.
Yeah, and David Denton, the New Revelations, where he mentioned some of the work that I did on Orestes Pena, and I was,
So how did Ed Tatro wind up? He's not even mentioned here. We don't even see his name here.
Yeah, well, he's,
I've always wondered about Ed Tatro.
Yeah, and the one on Malin Brown.
Right. I want to ask about that because I had suggested Jimmy Brown, who's Madeline's older son, she had a marriage before she had her affair with Lyndon. So when she was 24, she began her affair with Lyndon in 1948. She already had a son, Jimmy, by her her marriage, which is where she acquired the name Brown. So I had suggested that Jimmy be a part of this panel, but for whatever reason, he was excluded. I thought that was a mistake.
I think that you also should have been on this panel, Jim, but obviously, because you had a lot more interaction, with Madeline than some of these people here. You know, Robert hardly.
He'd be a great person to have at a conference, that's for sure.
Yeah, Robert hardly talked, you know, in this panel. You know, I don't know why.
What did Robert Groten have to contribute?
Very little, very little. Gary Saracen was the one that did most of the talking there, and Dr. John Williams. You know, Robert, like I said, he had very, very little.
What were they talking about? Madeline Brown?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know, I mean, Stephen was her offspring by Lyndon, of course, as you well know.
Yeah.
And it's a fascinating story. I was originally going to be a part of that panel, except that I had two members of my family who were participating in plays Thursday night, and I would have been strung up if I hadn't gone to the plays. So, you know, I mean, it was great to see them perform.
Family comes first.
Take that panel. That's why Judith had to move me to Sunday.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But tell me, Larry, about your presentation on the Alchin 6. Tell us about this.
Karen Walk produced the actual blow up of the Alchin 6 that Jim Garrison used in the trial of Clay Shaw. Okay. And it was carefully wrapped in cellophane.
This is the very one that Jim Garrison had used as a prop as evidence in the trial?
That's right. I held it in my hands, Jim.
Larry, how fantastic.
Wow.
I held it in my hands.
Man.
Tell us more about that session. This is another reason they popped up the guy with a negative, Larry. It was to pull the rug out from under you.
Yeah, because of what I said and what Rick Russo also said, because Rick Russo also went in and that was all damage control. Well, we're going to cover that, you know, in a little bit, but
yeah, that's why I'm going through it sequentially to get the background for some of what happened later.
Yeah, what I did is I showed the different versions of the Alchin 6, namely the enhanced one that we use all the time, the one that Dennis Camino got, which is cropped on the left side, which does not show the women that are recording.
On the sidewalk.
That's right, that are on the sidewalk, which we have identified as Maggie Brown and Ann Donaldson, okay, who have cameras to their faces, trained right on the LBJ limo, okay, and the Saturday Evening Post versus the Saturday Evening Post of December the 14th, 1963, which showed those women, but did not show the upper part that shows the African-American man who was on the fire escape on the Dow Tex in the background. Okay, so what I did was I did an overlay to complete the entire picture, and then I only did like 9 slides, okay, and I showed some of the anomalies that are so obvious, you know, that anybody who looks at this, you know, for example, the windshield, not the hole in the windshield, but the tint, how they altered the tint on the top of the windshield, how it is not horizontal, rectangular, okay, uniform, the way it looks in the Queen Mary, which is right behind, rather, which shows that Kellerman has been blacked out, that Greer has been blacked out, okay, in the area of the windshield, and the area of the African American, and I did a comparison with the Alchin 5, where you can see that big blob that's covering his lower body in the Alchin 6 is not seen in the Alchin 5, okay, and like I was mentioning right now, where one is cropped on the horizontal plane and the other one is cropped in the vertical plane, okay, which therein in itself, you know, tells you, you know, that, you know, it's been manipulated, you know, to show, you know, have more data in one than the other, and, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Did you talk about how Black Tie Man is in front of and behind?
No, I didn't go into anything about the doorway. And what's so amazing is that later on when Rick Russo did his Alchin 6, he pointed out the issue of Emory Roberts, you know, with the area in the mouth that has been blacked out. And he also surmised that he was talking on a microphone. And something very interesting in Rick Russo's, you know, we'll cover it later when you get to that page. Where in LBJ's follow-up car, he discovered that we talked about this halfback. Remember we talked about where it's off of the pavement in frames 155 to 158. We did that show the other day,
Right.
giving credit to Roy Schaefer. But what he discovered in the Auction 6 is that the agent that's opening the door in the back, the rear door, the left rear door, actually had some kind of a rifle, AK or some kind of automatic rifle.
Yeah.
And he's positing the fact that this guy might have been actually shooting some kind of diversionary shot. And I thought that one just blew my mind, Jim. I forgot to tell you about that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he showed how the area of the Auction 6 has been masked to hide, the barrel, which is going above the roof of the car and all that, and vertically up in the Auction 6. Later on, if we have time.
Later on, holding the machine gun up when they're on their way to Parkland.
Yeah, exactly. And he showed
that was in the Queen Mary. That wasn't. He's talking about.
That's true.
No, but Gary's right. Gary's 100% right, because later on he showed that's from the Times Herald photograph where they're on Stemmons, and he showed this is the same rifle that is seen that was erased from the Auction 6 photograph. That's one that I never knew about. Okay, and Rick talked about that in his presentation, and a lot of very interesting stuff that we'll talk about later. But go ahead.
But then we had the very important Tom Whitehead and Sidney Wilkinson presentation, where these are the Hollywood film restoration experts who have a sensational, very clear version of the film. I've been in their studio, Larry. I've seen their film. It's unbelievably detailed. I mean, so superior to anything else.
That's right.
Quality. Tell us about her presentation.
It was outstanding. It was gripping. It was unbelievable. The people there were just mesmerized by their presentation, even though it was via Skype. They were talking to the audience, telling them that they
Wait, hold on. Are these the Hollywood experts that have been supposed to
for so long and never produced? Yes, Gary.
That's right.
The ones. That goes back to 2012 minimum.
Of course. They were finally making a presentation about it.
Yeah,
I can't wait to hear what they had to say. What did they say, Larry? I've been waiting for a long time.
Let me talk. They were talking first of all about how what a delicate situation they had there in California, because they were fairly close to the fires. And that not only was the internet a little bit unstable, but the electricity, in that area from where they were broadcasting from via Skype. So that was kind of gripping in itself. But they focused on frame 317, and they showed a very clear image of that frame, which they went into the National Archives and they obtained a copy. I think they paid almost $800 for a copy of the Zapruder film. And they did the 6K scans, that we all know about. And they were showing how there is a big blob covering the occipital parietal area of JFK's skull, and how they tried to also do it in the prior frames to sort of give it continuity, all right? And whereas when they did that, that blob dances, all right, in the Zapruder film, and you were only able to detect it in these 6K scans. Now, later on, Grodin found it necessary the next day to try to refute that. And I thought, it was pathetic, in the way that he did and how condescending he was. I think you saw that, Jim.
We'll come back to that, Larry.
Okay, good.
But yeah, this is important. That finally, Gary, we got from Sidney Wilkinson and her group. These are very good people. They have said repeatedly how amateurishly it was blacked out. I think they blew up the frames and actually painted it out and then shrunk the frames.
Right. Yeah, but then not only that, Jim, they went to some of their colleagues, experts, two, not just one, but two, who also confirmed and reiterated their research and said, how comical and how amateurish,
Yes.
this looked in light of that back in the day, that would have passed, okay, because of technology, but not today.
Well, this is where Grodin really embarrasses himself by trying to contest what these Hollywood experts are producing. I mean, they've got the goods, and he doesn't have anything adequate in rebuttal. And I thought it was quite pathetic, Gary.
Yeah. We have to remember that for a long time, that Lino Sanek and Jim DiEugenio have been saying that there is some evidence that are possibly coming forward that the Zapruder film has been altered. This is it for them. This is as far as they go.
Well, that's ridiculous, of course, since there's so much more.
Yeah, really.
Now, go ahead, Larry.
No, I agree. There's so much. I mean, that's,
Now, when we got down to William Law, Hubert Clark, and James Jenkins about the autopsy, Jim Jenkins, of course, is one of the medical techs who got the body out of the pinkish gray shipping casket along with Paul O'Connor and put the body on top of the table at the morgue, where it had been brought over in a black hearse, I believe, from Walter Reed, where they took it in a helicopter so the best forensic pathologist could remove metal fragments. It wouldn't have done to have metal fragments of different calibers show up in the body. It had been unloaded in a body bag on the opposite side of Air Force One when the bronze ceremonial casket was downloaded on the opposite side with Bobby and Jackie, and all attention was on them. They offloaded the body in a body bag and helicoptered it over to Walter Reed, and then brought it in a pinkish gray shipping casket to the back of the morgue in a black hearse, while the official entourage was following the gray Navy hearse with Jackie inside, where Gerald Custer, who was the x-ray technician, explained to me how he was headed upstairs with x-rays to have them developed, and he looked outside and he saw this huge entourage, the gray Navy ambulance, and Jackie heading up to the front of the hospital, and he thought to himself, what in the world's going on? Because the body was already in the morgue undergoing autopsy. So when I was with Jenkins, I wanted to get some clarity about the wound as it was observed, because at Parkland it was a fist-sized blowout. We have a lot of other reports. Gary Aguilar tried to make it look as though it was completely consistent and only a few had discrepancies with the dimensions of the wound at Bethesda. But the fact is that the official autopsy report from Bethesda describes a much larger wound, which David Lifton diagrammed in best evidence. So I wanted to ask if he were aware of the surgery to the head. And he claimed that that hadn't happened, that was a misunderstanding, which bothered me profoundly, because you have Thomas Evan Robinson and this fellow Reed, who was a medical tech, both observed Commander Humes take a cranial saw to the skull of JFK and enlarge the wound to make it look more like something that had occurred or might have occurred from a shot from behind. Larry had to step away. Gary, you're aware of all that, right?
Yeah, this is something we've talked about quite a bit.
So Jenkins disappointed me there because he seemed to want to deny that there'd been this alteration when it's described in mathematical precision right in the autopsy report.
Absolutely.
Then we have the next day, we had Ed Haslam, who was on Skype, Judith Very Baker, of course, several times. Ed Tatro introduced Rick Russo, and Rick had a number of valuable comments to make talking about the photographic evidence, including showing photographs of the Stemmen sign that displayed a very clear through and through bullet hole. Didn't you like that, Larry?
I loved it, and some of the stuff that he did on the images at Andrews Air Force Base, I thought were very compelling, where he showed that some of those photographs had been altered, had been masked and opaqued to erase and to block, to obfuscate the offloading of the casket on the other side of Air Force One. Okay, he did also that comparison of where he found the floor. Remember where it showed the tiles there?
Right. He discovered where they actually took some of the fake autopsy reports. It was in this animal lab behind where Russo matched the tiles and the location of the phone. Yeah. And of course, they had this support for the head that wasn't in the morgue.
And I must say, because Jim and I Jim asked me to do this overlay how many months ago? What, 5, 6, 8 months ago? Remember? Oh, yeah. On the profile.
Right.
And I was laughing because, oh wow, now you found out about this, because it's not the same nose, it's not the same ears. JFK. Remember that overlay? I think we should. Yeah. We have it somewhere. Remember, Jim? You said.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you said I want you to do an overlay on these, with the JFK actual photograph of JFK, and this one from the morgue, where he's laying down, and you got the profile and everything, and we did it. And I think in 5 minutes I told Jim it's not the same guy,
Right. No match.
Right.
And then, but to Rick's credit, the one that I was really impressed is remember the stare of death face is almost exactly a dead ringer to JFK when he had been, he had those back problems, something like 10 years before in the 50s. And they took that photograph of him where it seems like they transposed, that face onto a face of somebody in the morgue, to create the stare of death, because, I mean, the expression.
Right.
The expression is exactly the same, Jim,
Right.
Yes.
Rick made a lot of nice contributions.
Yeah.
Now, when you come to Saturday afternoon, this is the key. This was the Peace Day Resistance. This was the banquet. This was the whole reason for this conference. Mm-hmm. Basically, the way it was organized. You have Dick Russell talking about Richard K. Snigel, and he's presented an award by Robert Groden. Then you have Robert Tannenbaum from the HSCA, who's supposed to be talking about the mock trial, but instead stands up and says, Robert Groden is the greatest thing to happen to JFK.
And he did that last year, too.
History.
And he did it last year as well.
It was embarrassing, absolutely embarrassing.
Yeah.
And then you have David Dent presenting a lifetime achievement to Robert Tannenbaum. And then you have Robert Groden speaking about HSCA photos of concern. Now, I was so pissed off with Tannenbaum that I took a copy of Gary's book and went up to ask questions. But they timed it so there couldn't be any public questions. So
but what happened was that Tannenbaum took so long. He went over like by probably 20 minutes, Jim.
Right.
And he did. I think he mentioned Houston once. Okay,
right. That was all deliberate, Larry.
I thought he was going to go off on the people that organized the Houston witnesses.
Did he bring your name up?
Not at all. And instead, what he did was he came up with a real cockamamie version of what he did at the HSCA, where he made, a lot of mistakes. He talked about stuff that really did not comport with what really happened. Okay.
Talking about mistakes is hardly equal to what actually happened, because it was clearly a deliberate effort to redo.
I just thought that he had a lot of things really confused in his mind, from so many years.
This guy Tannenbaum was so full of bullshit, it was unreal. You had to get shovels to clear the route. It was disgusting.
Yeah, and then where Robert Groden was supposed to talk about HEA's photos of concern, he used that time to try to refute Sidney Wilkerson and Tom Whitehead. Remember?
Right, of course.
That's what he did. He did not use that time to talk about HSCA photos of concern.
Listen to this, Gary. He was saying these Hollywood experts who have this very high-quality film were simply mistaking looking into the cavity of the blowout at the back of the head.
Yeah, and that it was a third-generation film, that it had absolutely no value whatsoever, that he was the expert, that he had the good film, that he had the good prints, and whatever.
And get this for good measure, Gary. He had this little twit stand up and say, I own the negative of the Altgen 6. I can blow it up, blow it down, whatever. And as much as I'd like to find Oswald there, he's not there. It's Billy Lovelady.
And he wasn't even talking about the Altgen 6, Jim. And I have to add this. He was so condescending with Sydney and Tom, which was embarrassing because he kept saying, oh, I like those people. I've talked to them on the phone all the time. He never said, I've been to California and I've seen their research, like Jim, you know?
I've been in their studio and seen the film, and it's dazzling.
Right. All he said was, I've talked to them on the phone. They're really nice people. They mean well, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going over here.
Get this, Gary. I mean, when I had the opportunity to give my presentation, I'd come back and rebut this absurdity here because it was so blatant. You can't, the negative doesn't come self-certified. It doesn't come with a label. It says, I'm Lee Oswald, I'm Billy Lovelady. I mean, it's stupid for him to claim because he owns the negative, he knows the truth about this when he was obviously some kind of disinformation operator. And it turns out that Larry would learn this is a guy who's with Groden out in Dealey Plaza all the time.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. This guy comes in dressed in black, you know, mustache and goatee or whatever, comes in, and this guy wasn't even part of the conference. He obviously did not pay. He had never been seen there in any of the days, Thursday, Friday. He comes in right on cue, Gary, right on cue, you know. And when Groden is talking about the Zapruder film, he comes in and he says, oh, the Zapruder film, you know, was split this way and it's split that way. And that's how you get the entire strip and blah, blah, blah. Remember, Jim? And then he goes out of the blue and he goes, oh, and the Altgen 6, I own the negative. And as much as I would love it to be Oswald in the doorway, it's Billy Lovelady. And I own the negative. And I'm God here and blah, blah, blah. And
he just walked in and shouted that out?
That's right. He didn't even go to the microphone. We
don't even know the guy's name.
And this is really disturbing, fellas. I mean, this is the best conference.
It was a psyop.
And I go and I turn over to Jim and said, Jim, this is staged.
I mean, Tannenbaum was there giving Groden a rhetorical blowjob. It was embarrassing, that bad.
And it's not a good sign that Sarah Weck is next on the list.
I know, Gary. It's not a good sign.
I know, but this was so, and you know, this was so embarrassing that I think a lot of the people there, you know, noticed, you know, what was going on. And then obviously the next day on Sunday, you know, I came back to that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I was not going to let that go, obviously.
Well, I was so pissed off with Tannenbaum. I went up to ask a question, but I was cut off because it wasn't any time. So I went over to Tannenbaum, and I gave him a copy of Larry's book. And I said, we thought you were going to talk about the mock trial in Houston last year and how Larry was cut off, and you didn't say a word about it. And he said, oh, there wasn't enough time. There wasn't enough time, which was all bullshit. He ought to have been addressing that, not telling us about the virtues of Robert Groden, who's been an op on the other side from the beginning. And the idea that Judith is featuring him and giving him these awards and all this, to me, is completely disgusting.
Let me tell you about Robert Groden. I'm going to say this now. I've never said it before because, you know, but this, I have information, you know, from other sources that, you know, did you know he was born? His birthday is November the 22nd. Anyway, he, a friend of mine.
Birthday is November 22nd? That's pretty odd.
Yeah, very odd. He was 16 at the time. And my research has pointed to the fact that he befriended Harold Weisberg. You know, Harold Weisberg wrote a book, okay, where he just raked them, you know, big time and talked.
Well, they worked together a long time. Didn't they even have?
That appears to have been an infiltration of Weisberg's research and to affect him. In his second book of the Whitewash series, Photographic Whitewash, the last 4 pages are about how the staff was trying to conceal the fact that Lee Oswald had been in the doorway. And you know, Groden has, of course, denied that, was hired by the HSCA to explore and came back and said it was a false rumor, which of course is disgusting. And this is fascinating because he took this photograph of Billy Lovelady wearing a red and black checkered shirt, which is not the same shirt that was on the guy they claim was Billy in the doorway, who of course I refer to as Gorilla Man. He's much bigger, heavier, but the shirt on Gorilla Man has a pocket. There's no pocket on the shirt that Grodin photographed. Grodin claimed in his report to the HSCA that a study of the pixelation of the sleeves of Doorman and of Billy in the checkered shirt and the sleeve was a closer match to Billy than it was to Lee. When Judith eventually did her piece, she cemented that it was Lee in the doorway by finding the exact opposite to be the case, the exact opposite. So why Judith should be persisting in defending Grodin when he's obviously just a bullshit artist is beyond me.
Mm-hmm. And we believe that, okay, dig this, in the late 60s, Weisberg became godfather to Grodin's oldest son, Robbie, and they were family for a long time until they had that big falling out in the early 90s over Oliver Stone's movie. But in the interim, they had a lot of conflicts, going back and forth. In the summer of '76, Grodin was just about destitute, broke, and asking Weisberg to loan him money. And I'm talking about based on documents that I have seen in Weisberg's JFK repository, where later on, I believe that he in some way was sent to actually, mess up Weisberg's work, and try to, drive a wedge, and be some kind of a disrupting force in Weisberg's work. And Weisberg later on wrote a scathing manuscript attacking Grodin in a way that's really embarrassing, And this is a manuscript, a book that was never published. You can find it over there on Weisberg's site. And he talks about the dishonesty of Grodin and how he turned against him, and and then worked on
discrediting him.
Worked on being against Weisberg, and all the tragic situation, where the families were suffering because of the situation, going on between Grodin and Weisberg.
That's almost like having a wife of 20 years and you find out she's been sleeping around on you every night the whole time.
Nice parallel. So here we had the speaker's dinner Saturday night, and Judith has a third down the toilet award for the first media story about the Kennedy Association, the National Geographic's hit piece, The Lost Bullet. Now, David was there, and I was delighted to introduce him, and he gave a very nice talk about the Harper fragment. This was the first of a two-parter because he picked up on it Sunday morning. But it would turn out that he would argue that there was a third shot to the head, Gary, that it entered right in the forehead, and that it was this that distributed the metallic particles through the brain, that the shot that knocked out the Harper fragment was the one that came in at the right temple and went more or less straight back and knocked out the Harper fragment. So that this occurred, it appears, after the limousine is brought to a halt. Jack's hit in the back of the head by a shot from the Dow Tex. He slops forward. Jackie eases him back up. And I think this is when he's hit with a shot in the forehead, the metallic, eases him all the way back up and is looking him right in the face when he's hit the right temple by the shot that blows the brains out the back of his head that hit Officer Hargis with such force he thought he himself had been shot. So this was, to me, the best takeaway from the conference. David clarifying, from my understanding, the third shot to the head, where I'm now convinced that he's right about it. And of course, I mean, what an honor to introduce the leading expert on the medical evidence in the death of JFK in the world.
I thought it was an honor just to sit at the same table with him, Jim.
Yeah, it was great. And then we had Cyril do his thing. And Bonnie came up and said a few words about how she's been jerked around with her longtime program, Guns and Butter, which is virtually legendary, and how she's been hassled and cut off. Then we had the box dinner for those who didn't attend. Then the following morning, David completed his discussion about the Harper fragment and the head wounds, and Larry came back on the blender and the Harper fragment. But
no. But
this was about Roscoe and the backyard.
That's right. It was preempted because I found it necessary to do the backyard photos after I did some more research and some more work on the new overlays. And I told Judith, I think a week before, I said, Judith, I'm changing, the topic of what I'm going to talk about. And it's going to change, to the backyard photos, which I thought was the right decision to make.
It was, Larry, and the audience responded very appropriately when you did the overlay, showing that Roscoe had to have been the stand-in for Lee in the backyard photographs.
Yeah, well, not only that, we had new and improved overlays and images and graphics and the entire situation of how Roscoe had the photographic training to have been able to do this.
Right. I think he was responsible for the backyard photographs. Roscoe did it.
And having worked at Jaggers Chow Stovall, the whole, when you bring it all into perspective, the whole picture, it's just no other way, unequivocal. It had to have been Roscoe. And when we did the final overlays, where I color coded, and I extracted the beach photo and put it in, and remember I did also the grids, and everything where you could draw empirical evidence. Data the way that we did with the man in the doorway, then it was quite evident, and a lot of people there was just completely stunned. In fact, they went over to Dave Garrity and they told him that was one of the most powerful presentations that they had ever seen.
Love it.
Tell me more about Bonnie Faulkner. What kind of trouble has she been having?
No, but before we finish, Gary, I had shown my book. I had it in my hand, and I said, because I was talking about the scientific protocol, and this is, let's back up. I had to mention the op that showed up there during Grodin's thing, and I said, look, I don't give a damn if you own the negative of the Altrin 6 photograph. What you need to do is, if you want to refute me, you need to go and follow the methods, the methodology that I have outlined in my paper, which is published, which is in this book right here that I'm holding up. And I would love for you to refute me, but since 2015, when we first started to work on this, not a single person has come forth and said, look, I followed your methods, and I have different results, and that is the way that scientific research is supposed to be conducted, right, Jim?
Exactly.
Of course.
Jim is published, on the scientific methods. All right.
And Bonnie had her show of 17 years canceled out in California, and it was still being broadcast in New York. But now there were developments there where it looks like she's being canceled out of New York. In other words, she's being targeted, and she thought actually it was
because of 9/11. Because she's her work is all on 9/11, Jim.
Was that AM and FM broadcast?
Interviewed me, Larry. That's a kiss of death. If you want to be taken down, just do an interview with me, for crying out loud. It's absurd. Then we had Jason Goodman introduce Kevin Shipp, who I thought was very impressive.
That should have been on prime time on Saturday, Jim.
He was my favorite of them all. I mean, given, of course, my appreciation for Larry's work, I like what Kevin Shipp was doing here as far as new contributions. He was so crisp, he was so clear, he was so organized, he was so methodical. Boom, 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 boom. It was excellent.
That's right. And this guy risks his life every time he goes out the door, Jim.
Now, Jason Goodman wanted to interview me, and he looks like he's very competent. He's very ambitious and very serious. So I want to do the interview with him, but I got back from dinner. We went out to a Mexican restaurant too late. That was, of course, after I'd done my presentation about Operation
Mockingbird.
Mockingbird, right.
Yeah, that, you can go and see that. That's JFK number 218. That's,
Well, this was an expanded and revised version, Gary. For example, because of what had gone before, this nonsense with Grodin and attacking Larry and the negative, I actually modified to expand my discussion about JFK. But yes, there's a version of it that we just did our last show. Tyrell and I'm going to go into what I presented. I've got the key slides from my presentation to talk about in relation to the others. Tyrell Ventura gave a very nice talk, and I was very...
Great guy. Great guy.
Didn't you like it, Gary? And then we had more of Judith and, you know, some more of this stuff about... Now, here's what I was talking about vis-a-vis Jim Jenkins, you know, how much the wound had been increased. David Lifton actually called a physician he knew and described the wound based upon the autopsy report, not identifying the source, and asked him what had happened to the victim. And he said it looked to him like he sounded to him like he'd been hit in the head with an axe. And that's why, look at the enormity of this. But Jenkins, for reasons I don't understand, was wanting to deny that Thomas Evan Robinson had seen what he reported having seen when he was deposed by the ARB. They asked him about these dotted lines, and Thomas Evan Robinson said, oh, no, the doctors did that because he'd watched Humes increase the size of the wound with a cranial saw. And frankly, Larry, I was dumbfounded that Jim Jenkins would say he was wrong. How could he gainsay what Thomas Evan Robinson was reporting having seen with his own eyes? I thought that was a low point for Jenkins. And of course, here, I've been for years trying to find out how the HSCA was able to accommodate, you know, or explain away the difference between their conclusion with the reconstructed skull on the right, where the wound has now been reduced to a small entry wound, which you can see in the diagram but cannot see in the photograph, when you had this enormous hole. How can they account for that? And I know you know, as I've reported before, when it dawned on me the enormity of the discrepancy, I called Cyril as a member of the medical panel and asked him, how did the medical panel account for the discrepancy between the massive blowout described in the autopsy report from Bethesda and their own conclusion? And Cyril told me, I'll have to check my notes.
Man. So,
now, notice the skull flap there in the diagram, because that's important. David, as I explained, you know, if anyone has any doubts about the magic bullet theory, and this was very strange because we had Tannenbaum waxing about Mark Lane interviewing Lee Bowers and Larry about, you know, the shot sequence and all that. And it was ridiculous because he wasn't talking about when they were talking about seeing Douglas Jackson motor up on the side of the grassy knoll, which by itself refutes the legitimacy of the Zapruder film.
With S.M. Holland.
Yeah, Sam Holland and Lee Bowers.
That's right.
Both reported to Lee.
And most recently, Bob Jackson, as we have shown here, we even showed the video where he said that a motorcycle cop went right up the knoll, you know, and let go of the motorcycle. Motorcycle kept going by itself until it fell over, you know.
Yeah, I mean, thank you very much, Sixth Floor Museum.
That's right.
When I pointed out, when Cyril talks about the absurdity of the magic bullet theory, he ought to be citing David Mantick's decisive proof, where he took a patient with similar chest and neck dimensions and plotted the official trajectory, only to discover it wasn't even anatomically possible because cervical vertebrae intervened. So that when they do these reconstructions and simulation, they're supposed to show the magic bullet as a possible trajectory. They leave out an anatomical feature, namely a backbone, which, as I've observed on many occasions, is ironic because Jack was taken out precisely because he had backbone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Embarrassing. And then I pointed out how David's study of the autopsy x-rays identified this area P, which was patched for the fist-sized blowout. And when I discovered you could actually see the blowout in frame 374, you notice the striking similarity. Of where, of course, there's a bit of hair that extends over the blowout. It's the gray matter, not the pink. That's a skull flap you can see in the HSCI diagram. But I'm embarrassed that Judith is featuring again and again people who are obviously covering up. I mean, even Cyril Wecht is not equal to the task. And if he can't explain how they went from the massive defect at the back of the head described in the Bethesda autopsy report to a small hole at the back of the head, what is the value of his contribution? What is the value? And then I pointed out how we have many other proofs of the alteration of the film where Rick Russo had presented photographs showing the Stemmons freeway sign had a hole in it. So, of course, they had to replace it. But as John P. Costello has demonstrated, and as you see here, they put it in the wrong place. Mm-hmm. There you can see in the black and white where the sign actually was located. And then you can see in the color overlays where they put it in the video. So anyone who wants to say, oh, there were only a couple of tweaks, a couple of missing frames, is just shoveling shit. And of course, that's what we get from Robert Roden. I mean, Larry, Gary, it's embarrassingly bad.
You know, Jim, actually, I did that overlay about 2 or 3 years ago. That one. Yeah, I'm the one who did that.
Oh, you did this one. I thought it was John P. Costello.
No, I did that one.
Nice one, Larry. I love it. I love it. And of course, we come to the, you know.
If you were to ask me right now where to find it on my hard drives, I couldn't even tell you.
Well, I got it. Notice. So after Greer brought the limousine to a halt and Jack was hit, we now know 3 different times. Hargis dismounted from his bike, left his bike there, rushed between the 2 limousines up the grassy knoll. Officer Jackson motored up on the grass until the bike fell over. 5 agents surrounded the presidential limousine. One grabbed a little chunk of skull from a little boy and threw it in the back seat, which, by the way, I'm convinced is the Harper fragment that they brought it back to locate it at a different place so that it would confound the forensic reconstruction of the event, and try as hard as I can. Although I originally thought the stop was only 6 to 8 seconds, I cannot envision all of this activity taking place in less than 20. This is also when Clint Hill rushes up and gets on the back of the trunk where Jackie's climbed after a chunk of Jack's skull and brains and pushes her back into the seat, lies over and sees the fist-sized gaping hole in the back of the head and gives his colleagues a thumbs down. Well, that thumbs down and all these other activities, of course, had to be excluded from the Zapruder film. And then I talked, too, about the Alchin 6 because, you know, in relation to this guy who claimed he owned the negative. I mean, how could you identify the figure? Well, look at the height, the weight, the build, the shirt, and the T-shirt. I mentioned how the figure is both behind and in front, that they've obscured the shirt and blacked out the face of this figure because it was Billy Lovelady wearing a red and white vertically striped shirt, which he'd shown to the FBI that day. So they had to obfuscate. It would have been all too clear that Billy wasn't the man in the doorway, where Billy himself observed that he was 2 to 3 inches shorter, 15 to 20 pounds heavier than Lee, and he thought it was odd they would be confused. And then where Larry has gone forward with facial overlays to show not only are Lee and Doorman the same with regard to height, weight, build, shirt, and T-shirt, but they have the same facial features as well, where you have Lee on the left fitting hand in glove and Billy on the right, all wrong. The nose is wrong, the jaw is wrong, the ears are wrong, the general size and shape of the skull is wrong. Larry, it's embarrassingly bad. We thought that this guy Tannenbaum was going to condemn the exclusion of Larry. But the fact of the matter is he was there with no apologies. He never got around to addressing it. And now I know, of course, that I have to modify my drawing because Jack was not just hit 4 times, but actually 5. So I have to, and I'm asking Larry, I don't know if you saw the email, Larry, to assist me by adding, you know, the one more shot to the head coming from the South Knoll. And then here are romantic references. David did a great job. Very, very nice. And I have to reconstruct now to add. See, since I actually have a shot from the South Knoll here, the orange, what I need to add is the shot that went through the windshield from the inside of the triple underpass, Larry.
Right.
could add a line for me too, so I can have a more adequate reconstruction.
Yeah, the cubby hole, the cubby hole.
Yeah, the cubby hole, the cubby hole, the cubby hole. So, you know, if people want more, obviously, here from my book and from Larry's, they can get it. Or as I say, if you want instant gratification, I have a 2-hour video with all the visual evidence at BitChute JFK, who is responsible and why. Gary, I want your take on what we've been reporting here as to what went down at this conference. What do you think this was all about?
Spookfest.
It's another spook fest, but the problem is there was another conference with Deborah Conway. So if you thought this one had problems, then my God, and that's really what I wanted to talk about. I mean, these conferences have been going on and on and on, and I just haven't been feeling good about them at all. And we've been featuring Robert Groden over and over. Now we're not sure what to think of Judith. Of course, it's been infiltrated, and it's been infiltrated to
Larry, Gary, let me explain.
Yeah, the other conference is just outrageous.
Gary, let me add this. After I gave my piece about the infiltration of the media by the CIA in Operation Mockingbird, it's very comprehensive. I had 45 minutes. I had 88 slides. I ended in 44 minutes. But Judith decided she had to talk about, well, you take it down a sec, Larry, and then we'll put it back up. Judith,
it just crashed on me. Hold on.
Yeah, Judith decided she had to comment to imply, you know, that I wasn't being anti-Semitic because I explained the Zionist influence, how all our raw data goes to Tel Aviv, and how they're using Facebook and the social media to crack down, in stories reporting how they're taking instructions from both the U.S. and the Israeli governments. I never used the word Jew once. I didn't point out that there's a lot of, collegiality between the Mossad and the CIA, and how 9/11, this was an op that was brought to us, compliments of the CIA and the Mossad and the neocons of the Department of Defense who've been brought in from the Project for a New American Century. But she felt she had to get up and make a statement, to which Dave Gahary took rather strong exception because it was totally unnecessary, Gary, totally unnecessary.
Jim, this is the one thing that is not tolerated at these JFK conferences. And you have been chastised just for the little bit that you brought up, and there's so much more. Of course we know that. So this is the big secret.
You know, I was reminding Jim about what happened in Arlington between you and those fellas, remember? When you were giving your thing about the dual citizenship?
In Arlington?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And all I did was show the Dimona letter from Ben Gurion or JFK to, was it Joseph Ben Gurion? I mean, David Ben Gurion?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I almost started a riot at that conference just by bringing up.
I had three panels, three of my slides. One was 100 executives of CNN who are dual U.S. Israeli citizens. Another was 100 executives from NBC who are dual U.S. Israeli citizens. Another was 100 executives from the New York Times who are dual Israeli.
You cannot bring that stuff up.
Boy, I brought it up. I brought it up in spades. But I really felt in retrospect, Gary, that she was using that to undermine me, not because of that, but because I was also rebutting Groden and this guy and Tannenbaum, who were just shoveling so much nonsense.
The oldest trick in the book is to call you anti-Semitic. Okay? It's the oldest one.
Well, I'll tell you, it shook my confidence in Judith right then and there.
My confidence in conferences has been going down for years now, and I'm wondering what we're accomplishing other than just a few things. And there are good people there, but like I keep saying, if you think this conference had problems, you should have gone to the Deborah Conway conference. You ought to check out that roster.
Yeah. I'm sure it was full of ops. Larry, I know you want to present some slides here. Why don't you go ahead and do that? We have about 10 minutes left.
Yeah, just a couple of slides here.
But there was a time where Judas conferences were not loaded with ops like this.
But do you read it that way based on what Larry and I are reporting to you here and now?
Yes, absolutely. It's just it's been, they always do the same thing. They always come in and co-opt your development, and I'm wondering who's involved with who. Remember, it's 9 out of 10, right? 9 out of 10 are working the other side of the street.
Right,
So,
right.
I just thought Judas conferences were closer to the truth, and they still are. But I'm really feeling like we've had a major setback in these conferences and what they accomplish.
I'll tell you, although Judith preempted at the end, I had 30 people from the rest of the time I was there, right up to the time I departed, coming up to tell me how much they appreciated what I presented. I mean, 30 people. I don't think I've ever had that happen at any other conference where people kept coming up. I mean, I'd run into them in the elevator. I'd run into the hall. I ran into them in the cafeteria. I ran into them when I was checking out. And they came up to tell me how much they appreciated what I had done. 30.
Yeah, this Tannenbaum, this guy has sort of come out of nowhere. And I'm just really disappointed that he didn't bring up Larry, because he had a chance to redeem himself.
Right, and here are ways why you should have brought up Larry. Go ahead, Larry.
Well, these are the new overlays that I did. We've already presented some prior, and we went with, this is Commission Exhibit 133A, the first one, where it shows the militant and the worker, and him holding the rifle in his left hand. And then we did here, I don't know if you guys can see it, where I have the probe. Can you guys see what's going on?
Yeah, we see it. We see it.
Okay, probe and gallery.
Of course.
Don't forget, the probe is your control or the unknown, and the gallery is the image that you're testing. Okay, we've done this before, you know, with the man in the doorway. So the terms are consistent here. And then we have two different gallery images for Lee. This one at the City Hall, the night of the 22nd, where he still has his tweed shirt, richly textured, you know, rust colored, you know, with a couple of buttons missing, and it's ripped here and there in the elbow.
Larry, you got 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, well, actually, with this show, we can run over, right, Gary?
Yeah, there's no problem at all.
Go ahead, Larry.
So this time I introduced a new gallery image, the DPD photograph of Lee. And what I did was I extracted it from the actual photograph. As you can notice here, you know, what do you call that sign there that they have on the side that identifies the date and the identity of the person? I took that out.
Shot?
Yeah, of the mug shot. Yeah, and yeah, I took that out and I traced it. I actually used Photoshop, you know, with magic wand and everything that extracts, you know, the lines and everything. And this one came out pretty good, actually. So that you're working with the exact image, okay? And very interesting what happened, because first of all, we did this with Roscoe, okay? And we determined and we saw that the shoulders, the neck, the traps, you know, the chest and everything are a perfect match, okay? Uh-oh, are we here?
Yeah, we're still seeing the same picture. There we go.
Okay, I think something happened here. Oops, I'm not able to get this.
Yeah, hit slideshow.
Can you pause?
Maybe. Or hit slideshow.
It's not.
You're on.
Yeah, Larry.
Oh, I see what's going on. We got different. Can you see that?
Yeah.
You got a screen share. Okay, never mind.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, this is, okay, you ready?
I've already resumed, Larry. I gave you a countdown. Go ahead.
I wanted to show this because this is one of the most amazing images I've ever seen, and it has to do with the beating that Lee received in the Texas theater. Okay, and I was pointing this out. If you see these lacerations, this is what they put on him was mercurochrome. Remember the old orange stuff that they
Yeah, I
put on?
remember it.
Yeah,
It's also
yeah.
very distinctive and stands out to anyone who's an observer.
That's right. Here and on the bridge of the nose, because I saw that Rick Russo tried to insinuate that the NOPD and the DPD mugshots were not the same man. And of course, if you consider, you know, the beating that he took, and you can see the puffiness here
He's got a black eye.
over the left eyebrow, okay, where they also put mercurochrome. So you got 1, 2, 3, and I thought that was very interesting. Once I blew this up, you know, it's very, very evident here.
I
know?
agree.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, the chins, you know, we did this before, and we this was the NOPD, and this was very interesting because the bulging on the left side, when you look at it from the front, or you know, on the right side of the head, okay, from the NOPD, but then when we do with the DPD, we get a different situation, okay, and this was the Bobby Brown, okay, and we happen to have two images, photographs of Bobby Brown doing reenactments, this one and this one, and they happen to be the same poses of 133C, the one that was found with Roscoe White. Okay, and then this is the ghost image, okay, which insinuates, you know, that there was more to this than met the eye regarding, you know, the manipulation in trying to frame Lee. And then Roscoe with the square chin, the chameleon that he was. And I pointed out here where you can see this is 11/5/63, okay, and he's almost bald. And this one where he's, you know, much later in life, you know, probably, you know, 8 or 9 years later, and he's wearing a hairpiece.
Yeah, toupee, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Larry, I mentioned about Roscoe that we had good reason to believe he'd taken out as many as 50 witnesses in JFK. Someone asked me when I was returning for a cite on that. I believe I got that from you. Do you recall a source on that, or what I should tell him?
I can find out, but yeah, sure. Somewhere I have a diary of his, you know, where he writes that he's tired of killing people and stuff like that. Believe it or not.
Nice.
And that they had him, you know, in a way that compromised, okay, that he couldn't really walk away, and that they wanted him to continue to, you know, do
Look
hits.
at some of these photographs: bottom center, center left, top center. I mean, this is the cheerful, the cordial, the congenial assassin.
Yeah, and not only that, look at the chameleon that he was, and he still has that square chin, Jim.
Yeah, sure, of course.
And we did this before, how he had been trained in photography and doing all.
Well, you know, a mechanic is another term for a shooter, Larry. So the fact that he was a mechanic, you know, that fits.
Yeah, good one.
Yeah.
And then the beach photograph, which is so important because here we can get this frontal shot of him, you know, and be able to use that in the overlays, which is what we do here.
Yeah.
And then Jack White, his brilliant research here, where he discovered that lump on the right wrist.
Yes.
Yeah. And then the overlays, you know, the beach, you know, versus 133A. And then the other gallery image, you know, Lee in the at City Hall. And the other one here, the DPD, which I had never done before. And the results were startling, you know, because, and I'm going to show you in a second here. And then the 8-panel collage, you know, of Roscoe.
Very nice, very nice.
How, you know, everything just matches up perfectly, you know.
Yeah.
The neck, I think the neck, you know, is just so amazing because the neck fits perfect, you know, and then the trapezoids, you know, the chest, the upper torso, you know, right here under the armpit, you know, it's perfect. I don't know anything that we've ever done anything that matched as good as this, you know.
Yeah, that's good. It's very good.
Where we've got zero opacity, 50% and 100%, and here we've got the chins, how they match, And then we've got a GIF going here, an animation, which, people, were able to enjoy this, there at the conference. And then going on, we've got another one, which is a little bit of a close-up, which shows, and I want to concentrate here at how under the armpit, the right armpit, left side, when you're looking at it, it fits perfectly. And then the neck, okay.
Yeah.
The traps.
You've done the job, my friend. You've done the job.
How can this be refuted? I just don't know here. And then and we do the same thing with Lee, color coded. As you can see, the shoulders, are higher. The neck is a lot thinner.
Right. When you put Lee over what's supposed to be Lee, it ought to be an exact fit, but he's much too small.
It ought to be. That's right, Jim. It ought to be, but it's not. Okay. And here we've got the overlay of the GIF, as it goes. And then interpupillary distance as we apply it to the DPD. This is a new stuff. Okay. Again, all the marks, that Lee, from the beating that he took there. And then we did this grid. Okay, just to show you, and I think this was the one that really blew them away, because when I go back and forth here, okay, look at the eyes, concentrate on the eyes, okay, and the features. Just look at the eyes and you'll see that they are a perfect match. Then look at the nose, look at the mouth, okay, they do not move, What that means is that we are right on the money here with those features. But when you look at what's going on here with all of the space, and look what's going on here with the DPD photo, the bulging is on the right, not on the left, as we saw in the NOPD. You see what I mean? So and look at all the space here, and again, you can do measurements. You can actually do measurements.
Roscoe had a larger head than Lee.
Oh, big time. A much larger head and a thicker neck. And I can go and draw empirical evidence. I can, like Gary and I've talked about before, go and just count the squares, That's all you got to do here. So then we've got the other image here where it's a little farther out. What we're going to do is focus on the shoulders here. And look at this. This is amazing here. I mean,
completely different.
Completely, but guess what? Look at the face. The face. Look at the features. Just concentrate on this area here: the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. Okay.
Well, because they pasted his face, as he said, on somebody else's body, and now we know the body.
That's right, and it was a matte insert. I think the technique is pretty well, pegged down here. Yeah. The same technique that they use for the back of the head, in the autopsy photos, Jim. That's exactly the same technique,
Yeah, good, Larry. Yeah, good.
So then we go here, and where we're going to do with Roscoe, our friend Roscoe. Okay, and we've got this. Okay, notice how everything falls in the perfect alignment. Okay, and when we do the animation here, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt whatsoever here, that this guy that posed for the backyard photos was Roscoe White.
Yeah, I love it, Larry. I love it.
Well, the wrist.
That's what I got.
White had this a long time ago, but you just really cemented it down.
There's just one more point I'd like to raise, and you can remind me who made this contribution. The Secret Service, on the basis of the claim they had to do a radiological check, took all of JFK's metal parts, his watch, whatever, so it wouldn't deflect bullets. I mean, Gary, if you want to know how thoroughly they set up Jack for his own assassination, they took away everything he was wearing that was metallic, so that in Dealey Plaza, he had no metallic parts on him that could deflect bullets.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's disgusting. It is disgusting.
Right.
Well, Gary, what number show is this?
219.
Wow.
We've been at it.
Take us out.
All right. This is the current state of conferences, and we're going to have to do something about that. We'll talk about that in the future. JFK 219. We'll see you next week.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving indeed.
All right.